Will Loki join the Straw Hats? Is Loki going to be the final member of the Straw Hats who will sail with them to the final island of Raftel? Hopefully we can find the answer in today's video. And if you guys want to see more One Piece content, please subscribe for more as it really helps out the channel. And without further ado, let's get started. So, in order to determine whether Loki is going to become a Straw Hat, we first should look at how does a character in One Piece become a Straw Hat? How does Oda write a character that leads him to join the crew? Well, there is a certain way in how Oda writes these characters which makes them join the crew, and this type of writing has been consistent with nearly every member of the crew thus far. So the pattern goes like this. When the character first meets Luffy, they either do not want to join his crew, or they start off as an enemy or an antagonist to Luffy. Then by the time that the arc they are introduced in reaches its end, we get their backstory and they gain some character development which causes them to want to join Luffy's crew. Let's start with Zoro. Zoro initially declined joining Luffy because he wanted to pursue his dream of becoming the world's strongest swordsman. Then throughout Romance Dawn, we get Zoro's backstory, and after seeing Luffy trying to save him from his execution and hearing about his dream of becoming the king of the pirates, he decides to join his crew. Nami was introduced in Orangetown, and she declined the offer of joining up with Luffy's crew because she hated pirates. So she only joined him in an alliance because their interests aligned. She didn't become a full member yet until Arlong Park. Arlong Park is where we get Nami's full backstory, and we get character development from her when she asks Luffy to help her instead of trying to do everything herself. Luffy then defeats Arlong, and then Nami joins the Straw Hats as a full member. With Usopp, he was quite hesitant in sailing the seas at the beginning because he was scared of pirates, and although he said he wanted to become the captain of the Straw Hats when he first met Luffy, that was only meant to be a joke. Then after they defeated Captain Kuro, Usopp gets some character development and he finally decides to become a pirate. So he disbands his small pirate crew so that he can sail the seas alone. But then Luffy and Zoro just straight up told him to join the crew, and Usopp accepts the offer. With Sanji, he initially declines the offer to join Luffy because he had a debt that he had to pay with Zeff, so he didn't want to leave him. But after seeing Zoro risk his life when fighting Mihawk, and seeing Luffy's grit and willpower which ended up defeating Don Krieg, Sanji finally decides to pursue his dream of finding the Old Blue, and he decides to join the Straw Hats. With Chopper, Nami asks him to join their crew, but Chopper was very hesitant because of his past experience with humans. And Dr. Kureha talks about how recruiting him is not going to be very easy. Even when Luffy was chasing Chopper, asking him to join his crew, Chopper was still against it and he would constantly run away from him. Then we get Chopper's backstory with Dr. Hiriluk, and after Wappo's defeat, Chopper was still against the thought of joining the Straw Hat because of his appearance. But Luffy didn't care, and he still asked him to join them, and this convinced Chopper to learn to trust humans more, which shows the growth in his character because he started off by not trusting humans, so he finally decides to join the crew. With Robin, she does start off as an antagonist when she was going by Missile Sunday. Then after Alabasta, she does join the crew, but she only joined because she only wanted to learn the truth about the Void Century. She didn't really care much about sailing the seas with them yet. Then in the Water 7 saga, she leaves the crew because she felt that she didn't deserve to live anymore and that she would only be a burden to the crew if she stayed with them. But after we get her backstory and then her I want to live speech, we learn that she has finally found a group of friends who care for her and she really wants to sail the seas with them. So her telling the crew that she wants to live shows the growth in her character, and then by the end of Enies Lobby, she is now a legitimate member of the crew. Frankie started off as an antagonist just like Robin, but as the Water 7 saga goes on, we get Frankie's backstory and we see him develop as a character in Enies Lobby. We see that Frankie starts to like the Straw Hats more, and he wanted to build the Thousand Sunny using the materials that he bought using their money. Then he joins the crew at the end. With Brook, this is where he is the exception. When we are first introduced to Brook, he doesn't start as an antagonist, nor does he decline Luffy's offer of joining the crew. He was on board with joining them, but he couldn't join them just yet until he regains his shadow, which is why he joins the crew at the very end of Thriller Bark, even though he accepted Luffy's offer at the beginning. And finally, with Jinbei, during a conversation between Jinbei and Ace asks him to look after Luffy if he dies, and then Jinbei just straight up refused to do so unless he genuinely liked him. So that's pretty much Jinbei saying he is against joining Luffy. Then throughout Marineford and Fishman Island, Jinbei starts to take a liking to Luffy, and then he agrees to join him. But he had to leave Big Mom's crew before he could finally take up Luffy's offer. So Wano Country is where Jinbei officially joins the crew as their 10th member. So with most of the Straw Hats, they followed a certain pattern, in that they will start off as being antagonistic towards Luffy, or not wanting to join his crew. Then they go through a character arc, and we get their backstory to let us know more about the character. Then once they have finished their character arc, they decide to join the Straw Hat crew. Brook is the exception because he doesn't have a character arc since he already lived his full life as a pirate before his death. But he still started off as not joining the crew just yet because he had to regain his shadow. And then we get his backstory, and then he joins the crew officially, so Brook still ticks most of the boxes. And also, in the arc where a character joins the crew, they tend to be one of, if not the most integral character in that arc. The arc revolves around that character, making the readers want to care more about them. And it's because of this pattern that characters like Vivi, Carrot and Yamato didn't join the Straw Hat, because they didn't fully follow the pattern. None of them started off as a character who was either an antagonist, nor were they against joining up with Luffy. Vivi was technically an antagonist as Miss Wednesday, but she was only acting as a spy, and she needed their help in bringing her back to Alabasta, so it was only a temporary alliance. Yamato just straight up wanted to join the crew, but even after her character arc and her backstory, she decided not to join them at the end, which is the complete opposite of how the Straw Hats joined the crew, because none of them asked Luffy to join the crew immediately once they met him. And her character wasn't fully integral to the Wano arc as well, because she was introduced in Act 3 of Wano, not the beginning unlike the others. And Carrot was only temporarily with the Straw Hats to save Sanji. She doesn't really go through a character arc, nor does she play a majorly important role in Wano or Whole Cake Island. She was playing more of a support role. But how about Loki? How does Loki fit into this pattern? On Elbaf, when Luffy first meets Loki, we see that Loki was looking down on him and telling him to free him from the chains. Then later on during the arc, after the Holy Knights attacks Elbaf, Luffy asks Loki to join his crew, but Loki instantly refuses to join the crew. Even Zoro and Sanji were against it. So this falls in line with the other Straw Hat members declining Luffy's offer when he first meets them. Then next is the character arc, and currently we are in the middle of Loki's character arc. Ever since Loki was born, he was viewed as a cursed child, and even his own mother abandoned him. And because of this, Loki grew up hating his homeland and the villagers for making him an outcast, so he would constantly cause mayhem in the village. And because of Emu controlling King Herald, Loki was ordered by his father to kill him in order to protect Elbaf. And after killing his father, Loki decided to take the blame for himself, and he was sent to the underworld. So now in the current day, Loki is now clearing his name by taking down the world government, and he is also fighting to protect the same homeland that persecuted him during his childhood. And currently, he is fighting alongside Luffy to fight off the Holy Knights and Emu. So on top of initially declining Luffy's offer, we also get Loki's backstory, and currently Loki is having his character arc on Elbaf. And on top of that, Loki is also very integral to the Elbaf arc, because he was introduced very early in this arc. His character had ties to Rox and King Harold, and he is involved in the final battle against Emu. And then when looking at the mural found in Elbaf, it is supposed to be a prophecy of what's to come. And then when you look in the left hand illustration, it shows Luffy and Loki fighting off against Emu alongside other fighters in what looks like to be the final battle against the world government. So even after this Elbaf arc, Loki is still going to play a very important role in One Piece. Another thing to add is that Loki has a secret friend named Shaggy, who he talks to over the transponder snail. Loki has never met him, despite them both being longtime friends. So this could mean that if Loki joins the Straw Hats, then he could eventually find Shaggy in person. Similar to how Brook joined the Straw Hats to meet up with Laboon again, or Robin trying to find all the poneglyphs by sailing with the Straw Hats. Loki could sail with the Straw Hats, so he can also find and meet Shaggy in person. So judging by the pattern of how the Straw Hats gain their members, it seems highly likely that Loki will become the 11th member of the Straw Hats. However, there are two things that may go against this. The first reason is probably what everyone's thinking, and that is his size. How can a giant fit on the Thousand Sunny as part of the crew? Well, there's two ways to combat this problem. Either Loki travels alongside them on his own giant ship, which he may be rewarded from the giant pirates, or maybe when he goes into his hybrid form, he actually shrinks down to size. Those are two ways where he can still be part of the crew despite Loki being a giant. And the second reason that could go against Loki joining the crew is that when you go to the very first chapter of the One Piece manga, Luffy says that he is looking for 10 men for his crew. Now this could be interpreted in two ways. It could be interpreted as 10 men including Luffy, or 10 men other than Luffy, making it 11 in total. But this one statement might not hold any weight, since this was written over 25 years ago, and plans can change with Oda writing this series. So I still think it's highly likely that Loki will be the final member of the Straw Hats, just from looking at the pattern, and he seems to tick all the boxes. Even more so than characters like Vivi, Carrot and Yamato, who were each potential candidates to join the Straw Hat crew. But what do you guys think? Do you think Loki will join the crew? Or do you think the Straw Hats already have all their members? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you guys enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and thank you so much for watching.